everyone, and welcome to Call Your Hits, a Storm Riders Airsoft podcast. Thanks for joining us, everyone. Today, Pat and I are going to be talking about teams in Airsoft. Teams are a part of most organized sports, obviously, and because Airsoft is by its nature a team sport, players tend to want to create their own more permanent teams, right? People who you can keep playing with over and over. And it doesn't really matter whether your community is very small or much larger either. We founded the Storm Riders back in 2009 when there were only 3 of us, and the average game had no more than 8 players. A big game was 10 players. And there's a lot of reasons that airsofters seek out or create their own teams. So today, we thought we'd do a bit of a retrospective into why we chose to create the Storm Riders, what went into choosing our name, our logo, and all the things we've learned between now and then, in the hopes that it might help you, whether you're already on an Airsoft team or you're looking to join one. Now, if you're a lone wolf and you're not interested in teams, well, this is probably not the right podcast episode for you. But hopefully, you might hear something that might convince you that might be worthwhile to see how it would work out for you linking up with other people.
At worst, we hope you'll find it, entertaining.
Yeah, at the very least, totally. So let's jump right in. So let's flash back to 2009. So 2009, I'd been playing Airsoft for 3 years. Pat, you weren't far behind me.
Yeah, I think
at that time
would have been like a year behind you or 2 in terms of my playtime then.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was a very different Airsoft scene than the one we currently play in.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Honestly, we've had sort of I think 3 really disparate Airsoft scenes over the course of our play.
Yeah.
Yeah, back in my day, it was definitely a very small play group.
Yeah, and we, thinking back to those days, like we didn't play as often as we might have liked. Definitely not as there wasn't as many opportunities to play regularly as there are today. For one thing, if you got a game a month, it was at that time it was pretty good. And again, it was a pretty small crowd. Like I said, 8 players, and I wasn't exaggerating. Like there are games where we played with 6 people, and we're like, yeah, that was a great day.
I think a big part of that sort of scarcity of games came down to the fact that we had 8 players. Like I think maybe we had 12 players in total. Probably 6 of them were semi-reliable, and most of us were working some kind of shift work. So oh no, can't play this weekend. Got to go make money.
Yeah, exactly. And so at the time, I mean, we said it many, many times on the podcast before, but like you and I have been lifelong friends. So for you and I to want to get together and sort of rally under the same banner, it was not too much of a stretch of the imagination. Like we were sort of de facto doing that anyway. So sort of formalizing that agreement. And when we decided to do that, Cal was just joining the Airsoft scene. He was a really young guy. And he was really nice. We got along with him really well. And he seemed to have similar interests into sort of what we were interested in. He was obviously a very skilled player even back then. And so we felt that it was a really good fit for him to join with us. So we just said, hey, we're starting a team. Do you want to be, our third? Because again, like you have a community of 8 people. You're not gonna like have 4 or 5 people, like half the community basically on your team. We thought like 3 was enough, like me and Pat plus another one. And so that's what we sort of settled on. We said, okay, well, we'll get Cal. And at that time, there were no other teams. Like nobody had ever really had any interest, I guess, in getting together and creating their own team. And this really interesting thing happened where when we created the team, other people in the community were like, oh, so you've got 3 people on the team. Well, everyone in the community might as well just be on your team, right? Just everyone be on the Storm Riders. There's 3 of you, so there might as well be 8 of you.
Which is sort of that's not the point, guys.
Yeah.
Thanks though.
Well, yeah. And like the thing is, like for us, like we wanted to, play together, and we sort of, liked each other and liked each other's company, and that was all fine. And it's not that there were people in the community that we didn't like, but it's just, there are, just like in any community, there's people that you get along with more or less than other people. And so at the time for us, we're like, yeah, no, we're going to do the three of us is fine. And so when we created a team, then other people in the community who wanted a team did the same thing. Right. So at the time, there was a team that was formed called Coldwater NL, so Coldwater, Newfoundland. And
Hint:
they
our
were,
water is cold.
yeah. And so they were, there was the other team, and they were doing their own thing, and we were doing our own thing at that time.
And as you can tell, right, we thought a ton about this before we went into arranging it, right?
Mhm.
It was certainly very practical to have a three-man team when, on average, we might get 6 players or 8 players on any given day. And I think equally practical to look at people and go, yeah, we really want to play like together against everybody else. And I don't think it caused a lot of friction as such,
No, definitely not.
because with such a super small community, we all knew each other pretty well, but it definitely caused organizational hassle.
Yeah. And like, it's interesting you say we didn't really think about it, because we definitely didn't. Like, the rationale for us getting together and creating a team was nothing more than, hey, we want to have a team. Like, we want a patch, we want a name, we want a group of people who we play with all the time. That was it. Like, that's it, basically, as far as we had thought that through, right? And if you're listening, like, that may be as far as you've thought it through, and that's totally fine.
I think we'd settled on like wanting to do all sort of like NATO gear at the time as well. I
Yeah.
think that came up fairly early, but that was mostly because I think like we had the scars at that point, and Cal might have been on like a $200 plastic Kraken AK.
Yeah, he definitely was. Yeah, I have pictures from back then.
And so, like for him, it was an excuse to get another gun that was, perhaps a little more performance oriented.
And even then, I think he ended up getting the same scar that we had, and like we matched our gear, we wore multicam, like all that stuff, and really tried to
Thought we
fit.
were gangsta.
Well, yeah, and try to fit into this mold of, oh, this is what a team should be, right? So we had the same uniforms, the same gun, the same ammunition. Like, we dressed more or less the same. I know, Pat, like, you didn't wear a helmet, but I wore a helmet, and Cal wore a helmet, and like
Yep,
doing
head
all
was
that
still
stuff
huge.
to try and be as matchy as possible, right?
Yeah,
And
matching
that's
sidearms,
really,
all
yeah,
that good stuff.
totally. Like USP 45s at the time. Like, we were really stuck in that, not necessarily stuck, but we were really adhering to that mindset of, we want to be as uniform as possible. And at the time, we didn't, we weren't looking at inviting anybody else. It was just like, we've got this stuff, that's what we're going to use. And so we created our Storm Riders name, and that came from the fact that, again, our environment is not great in terms of weather. And so we said, yep, Storm Riders seems like a logical fit for where we live in Newfoundland. Um, and that was sort of it. I mean, that one of our graphic designer friends created the patch for us, and sort of off like a really weird, very simple like mock-up that I had done, and that was it, right? That's sort of that
Sort of
part
a
of
like,
history.
all right, we like metal a lot, so we're gonna go for skeleton on a horse with an axe. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
and
exactly.
like a Metallica-esque font, and he was like, I can do that.
Yeah.
you
And
know,
it's funny, like, talking to Jordan down in the States, like looking at his team, the Operators, it's very similar. Like, they have a patch with like a pair, like, because the whole Operators is the whole idea is like they're like pear shaped, right? Like, that's the whole idea.
I
So,
relate to this.
but his girlfriend or his spouse, I'm not sure which is correct. Jordan, please forgive me. Um, did like a mock-up of a pair with like an ammo bandolier and like a bandana and stuff, and it looks hilarious. But like, that's how stuff gets designed for a lot of airsofters. Either you draw it yourself, or someone draws who draws it. Like, we're not typically investing hundreds of dollars to go get a graphic designer to do up a logo for us, right? That's just not how it starts out.
Yeah, I mean, we lucked out in that, one of our good friends is a graphic designer and was willing to do the work for, like a pizza.
Yeah, exactly. So I think, so the first thing, obviously, if you're looking for that sort of perfect reason, a perfect way to start an airsoft team, I would say we didn't have it, and there's no real need for you to have it either, right? Like, do you want to play with people? Do you want to have a group of people that rally under one banner that you all think is pretty cool?
Yeah, if you're stressed about finding like the perfect moment and like way to set up your team, airsoft team, I have definite good news for you. There is no need.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like we've been pretty successful in terms of, like enjoyability of our team and of our airsoft career. And we
Yeah,
have definitely not been organized. Organized
totally.
is not the word.
Yeah. One of the things, and I would agree with that. I would say though, one of the things that we have been is picky about who we'd like to invite to the
Definitely.
team. And I think more so lately as the team has grown. But even when we were starting out, the most important thing for us has always been, we've said it many times, is do I enjoy playing with this person? Is this person cool to hang out with? Like, would I go and have a beer or hamburger or whatever with this individual? And are they cool to hang out with? Right.
100%.
Uh, and I think I'm repeating myself, but the point is, like, that should be the most important part. One of the things I've talked about before on the podcast is when you have a team, the team's reputation hinges on every single individual. And so if you have someone on the team going out there who is uh, exhibiting behavior that is not in line with your expectations as a member of the team, that looks bad on you and that looks bad on everybody else. If there's if there's someone on your team who's a cheater, then your whole team is cheaters, right? So it's for us, we were very conscious of that, and we always wanted to pick people who we could trust, right? And the only way you do that is by talking to people, getting to know them at least a little bit, and then playing games with them and figuring that out. And I would say you don't always know if you can trust people. People make judgment calls and errors on people all the time, right? People, found out that their spouses are cheating on them and stuff like that. Obviously, you trust that individual and it was the wrong place. But y- on the face of it, when you're playing with people, you can get a pretty good sense off the hop if this person is a cool person, or if they're not really the kind of person you want to associate yourself with, right?
And I think that, there's a mixture of like we've been selective, but also we've been pretty lucky. Like I think it is sort of a correlation between the 2 points. Because we've gotten really good people and we've looked for players at times. Like we've sort of, gone into things with, all right, we're quote unquote hiring, we do not pay. um,
Yeah.
we pay an exposure to BBs. But, the result has been pretty positive, whether it's been, us intentionally going looking for people or just like bumping into people who were playing and going, man, this person's rad, playing with them a bunch and then going like, yeah, you want to join our team because you seem cool. But one of the things that comes out of that I probably want to mention to people thinking about how airsoft teams work is just that this is a brand. And like, I don't mean that in the sense that we're trying to market stuff because we're really not.
Yeah.
I think it's fair to say that we don't have the interest or the aptitude.
Yeah.
But the way I'm using brand here is just once you have someone on your team, they're representing the group to everyone.
Yeah.
And it's definitely good to be conscious of that, both when you're, recruiting and when you are playing, right? Because when I'm playing, as a member of the Storm Riders, as part of our local community, in addition to the sort of being community minded and like trying to make sure everyone's having fun, that's sort of my norm, I also have to hold myself to some standard of behavior, right? Because if
But you don't have to
I'm
try very hard. You just naturally adhere to that standard of behavior. Do you know what I mean?
Well, sure, yeah. I'm not usually a huge jerk, except for the first like 30 minutes of the day when I haven't had coffee and I'm not awake.
Right.
I'm just sort of a surly pat. But in fairness, for most of our play career, the community was insulated from surly pat by the fact that my teammates were the ones talking to me at that point.
Mhm.
So yeah, shout out to the guys for putting up with me without coffee. But uncaffeinated pat notwithstanding, you know, it's important to keep in mind that, like, yeah, being a good sport is definitely just a thing I'm into in general, but it also like does help me, to minimize any salt, just because, yeah, no, like if I'm being a shithead, then it reflects on Phil and it reflects on Chris and Cal and everyone, and I don't want to be causing problems for my friends.
But to be honest, like I can looking back on all the players who we've had on the team, like whether like I think about oh my god, like there's so many people who've been on the team and who've also sort of left the team or done other stuff. Like I mean, we had um I can't remember the guy's first name, but his last name was Butt, and we just called him Butt. Butt is a very common last name here in Newfoundland. So if you guys are sniggering or whatever, that's fine. Just grow up.
We,
Anyways, point is,
hey, he lies.
um,
We make the jokes too.
he was one of the first guys who we invited, and he had some. He was a member of the reserve forces. Really nice guy. Then we had Mario, and we had Jason, we had Mark. After that, we had Miles, we had Chris, Shane, Matt. Well, the first Matt actually with Matt Repian. We got
Yeah, Matt the
Evan,
first, Matt the second.
Stefan, John, Josh. And then the new Matt, and then other people in between who
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 I shall
came
now
and
be
left,
calling New Matt for the
right?
foreseeable future, just for fun.
But yeah, and like even like Colby, and we had my goodness, Jordan, and there was another guy too, Marshall. He wasn't there a whole lot, and he actually moved away. But like,
That was a good dude.
yeah, all these people who I'm very, very happy to have had the chance, or many of them are still on the team, obviously, but really happy to have gotten a chance to know them. And I, without, failing to mention Patrick Short, who played with us for like 2 games and then suffered a tremendous injury and then sort of never came back to a game, but still shows up to practice or lets us use his warehouse or whatever,
and
right? Like,
and is just a fantastic person to hang out with and have a chat. Like, he's wicked. And I think as we grow older as airsoft players, excuse me while I go get my cane, um, we benefit from making friends. Like that is one of the
yeah,
absolutely sort of continuous and great parts of this. But they've all been wicked people to play with, and I genuinely do think that people have done a good job of playing airsoft sort of along the lines that we want people to play airsoft when they're on our team, which is to say playing to have fun, but also maintaining good sportsmanship and good conduct.
and to be fair to them, I also forgot about Jeremy and Kirby, right? So we've had a lot of people roll through the team, and to what Pat was just saying, like we've never had to enforce any sort of conduct. We've never had to enforce any sort of rules. We've had a very relaxed environment, but that's by virtue of the fact that we had took the opportunity to just not see people on the field and go, wow, that guy's really good, we want him on the team, but to play and find people whose attitudes, whose personality, whose interests sort of line up with ours, right? So if you look at, for example, Matt Davis, right, who just joined the team, right, as opposed to Matt Repian, um, you look at Matt Davis, we haven't played a whole lot with Matt, but we've seen him at training every single time we've had one, right? Like an open training day. He's a really good player on the field, absolutely, but his attitude is great, right?
He's super chill. He's there to have fun.
Yeah, and he's there, but
Like,
he's there to learn, he's there to progress, and that is true whether or not we share similar other interests. Like I think about Stefan. Stefan is probably as far removed in terms of what interests him in airsoft as for me, right? For years he carried a rubber knife. He does a lot of collecting, which I'm not into. Um,
he has some cool
but
toys.
but we converge, right? We converge in a place where we have interest, we want to get better, we want to hang out with the guys, we want to have a good time. All of those things are way more important than is this person good at airsoft or not,
For
right?
sure. I mean, I think genuinely the only people we've ever recruited, even partly because they were good, are Chris and Miles, and that was largely a matter of like we played with them for an extended like 8-hour game in really wretched conditions, like snow, ice, like slipping and falling every 5 minutes, and they were both a huge laugh to play with. Like they were just tremendously fun, even in probably some of the worst airsoft I've played in terms of like
Yeah, definitely.
conditions and beating myself up.
And we skipped over Jason Little. I mean, like it just all of them just keep coming back to me. It's like I can't imagine how parents who have like six kids do it. Like it's mental.
I
But
assume they just named them all Tim.
but yeah,
But yeah, and they were really like I think they performed really well that day, but mostly I think we both were like super impressed with just the fact that they'd made sure we had a blast, or like they'd helped us to have a blast
Mhm.
in these conditions where like it was minus 15. I couldn't feel
Yeah.
my fingers for the last 4 hours of the day.
So, I mean, you might be listening and going like, "Well, Phil, you just told me not to invite everyone on your team, but you just rattled off like 20 people. So, what exactly are you doing?" Well, hold on there, cowboy. Firstly, it's a lot of people, but over many, many years. And the thing that does happen as well is that, people leave. People leave the sport, people leave the team, right? So if you think about, just to give you some examples, like, I mean, I mentioned Marshall. He basically just moved to another province, so he doesn't play with us anymore. Same thing with Mario. Mario left, and these are people who still keep a patch and they're still a member of the team. And if they ever come to Newfoundland and they want to play a game, like,
Man, have we
come on
ever
out.
got guns for them?
Totally.
you
But
know,
that's also a natural cycle, part of the cycle of having an airsoft team and playing airsoft in general, is that people come in and out of the hobby. It's a hobby. It's not a lifestyle.
especially because, a lot of the people who, have moved away, like we've had a lot of players who are sort of in their early 20s. So there's a lot of movement in life in your early and mid
Mhm.
20s for a lot of people. We live somewhere that definitely a lot of people leave for work. A lot of people commute for work. There's a lot of strangeness in that way. One of the other things that's probably worth noting is that, a whole bunch of those people joined our team in sort of the middle piece of it there, timeline wise. And we did sort of, I think, luck out in that, Airsoft had a really huge boom there around like 8 years ago.
Yeah, yeah, about there.
And so uh, our local games currently are like 20 to 30 people on a reasonably good day. At the time, they were like 50. It's
Yeah.
just people coming out of the woodwork. And so saying, oh, yeah, there were probably 150 people in like our little city area playing Airsoft on the regular. So, yeah, we had ended up having like 18 guys, but
Yeah.
that wasn't an enormous percentage of the population, even though it sort of feels like that, especially were we to have them all right now.
Yeah, and it was never at 18 at once, right? It's in my entire time playing on the Storm Riders, we never had a game or any event, even a photo op, where everybody came out. Even the time that we did that photo op back in 2016 when Matt went away to his school in Alberta, and we knew that he wasn't coming back. We had, well, except for visits, obviously, we had a lot of people out that day, but we did not have everyone,
And
right?
I mean, again, you once you're trying to get 18 people in the same place at the same time, you
Yeah.
realize, oh, that doesn't happen. Like, just
Yeah.
everyone's got schedules. And one of the other things is we've never required this to be a priority, right? Like, it's been
Yeah.
come to training. Well, I mean, if it's interfering with work or like real life, don't.
Yeah. Exactly.
Make it a priority as a hobby, as a thing you do for fun, sure, but don't beat yourself up and you know oh god, I'm going to miss a day, they're going to kick us off the team. Like, we've never kicked anyone off the team. And
No.
certainly attendance to stuff is the last reason we ever would, right? Like, you know Mario is a great example, right? He's lived away for like 10 years.
Mhm. Yeah.
And he is absolutely still my friend. He is still an awesome dude, and he's still a member of our team as far as I'm concerned and as far as he's concerned, and that has no reason to change for us, right? That's not what we're here to do.
And like same thing, like on the Discord. I mean, Mark is on the Discord. His name is brackets retired because he broke his back and he's probably not going to come back.
He's a race car
But
driver now anyway. What can you do?
yeah, but like if he wanted to, he absolutely would, and there'd be a place for him.
If he wants to come out for like a single hour of play, I will hand him whichever piece of my kit he wants to run. Like, no
Yeah,
problem.
exactly. And that I think, when you think about a lot of the benefits of playing with a team, and we'll talk about them more, down the line. Like, yeah, sure, you can benefit from playing with the same people to get accustomed to their style, so you can come up with plays or whatever, like any other sports team, blah blah blah. But one of the benefits is just you have this camaraderie. You have people who can be your safety net on the field, who you can go and you can play with, and just have a laugh, and you're going to have a good time because you have like-minded individuals that are hitting the field with you. And it's hard to put a price on that because it's really like there's lots of games, open games, for example, that I'm like, oh, I want to play airsoft today. And if none of us are going, I'm not going to go, right? Because I'm not necessarily just going for the airsoft. Like, I'm going for the interaction with my friends, which are people on my team, right?
And I'm much the same way. I mean, the good news is that like, if I post on one of our group chats and go, "Hey, I'm going tomorrow," usually someone else will be like, "Oh, wicked," and I think
Yeah,
Phil's in the
yeah,
same situation. Turns out that more than one of us probably wants to play Airsoft on any given weekend. But yeah, it does happen that there are weekends where it's like, "Oh man, I really want to play Airsoft," and everyone else has some sort of commitment, and it's like, "Oh, I guess I'll sleep in," if I'm being honest.
yeah.
um, you know, because I'm not a morning person. But it works out to usually I have friends to go hang out with in between games of Airsoft and to play together, or against, right? Like playing against Phil is almost as much fun as playing on the same team as him. It usually ends up with me getting shot a lot, but whatever.
Not usually by me, so whatever.
Well, it varies, right? you know,
But that's a fair point too. Like when we started the team, like we were very much against being split up. Like we would go to frontline back in like 2000 and like 10, 2011 or something like that when it was just starting out there. And like we did not want to be split up. Like our mentality was, hey, no, we play together, so we're going to play at these games. And that might be fine if you've got 50 players showing up to a game and you got four players who are like, no, we're playing together. But when you got 12 people at a game, that becomes a lot more difficult, especially when those players are admittedly pretty good, because then you start to have balance issues, right? And there have been games in the past where we're like, oh, we're gonna play together, and the other team is like, no, we don't want to do that, right? And you have to be okay with that.
and I think there's a legitimate like argument that we were perhaps more stubborn about that for longer than we should have been.
Definitely,
You know,
definitely.
because I mean, I still would prefer to play with my team when I show up to play Airsoft. That's kind of the point. But I think we were forceful about it for perhaps longer than was really ideal for the community, simply because, as Phil noted, we had sort of like often 6 or 8 guys who were quite good at the game, relatively speaking, all wanting to play together, and it probably made the refs' lives harder than we were thinking about it. So I would encourage
Absolutely.
people to be flexible about that. But I would encourage people to be flexible about most of this stuff, I think. 'Cause,
Yeah. Well, and I think coming back to your point earlier as well about, going to the games and socializing with your friends and stuff, like that can you can only create an environment where people are comfortable and happy to hang out with each other if you're not creating an environment that is where you're basically putting the screws to people and like forcing them to do things that they don't want to do. One of the guys in the Discord the other day was talking about his team like enforcing camo, right? You have to wear this camo, otherwise you can't be on the team. And I'm like, so what exactly is the objective of that? Right? So you want this person on your team, but you want them to wear the same camo. And if they're not going to get the camo that you want, you're going to kick them off the team. So how badly do you want this individual? Do you want a body in the camo or do you want this person to be on your team?
and like we've had preferred camo and preferred kit, right? I mean, we've talked about that
Mhm.
before pretty clearly, but we ran multicam for a long while, and we're like, yeah, we'd prefer if you had multicam if you're going to play with us. These days it's more woodland. Well, I mean, honestly, I don't think these days that's accurate. For a while, it was like, yeah, we want to be playing woodland. But at the end of the day, I'd rather have, John in World War II gear having a laugh, or in shorts and a Denison,
Yeah.
uh, than have someone who's not my friend, you know. And we've sort of, I think, perhaps grown up a little in terms of going, well, like, no, what we're here for is not actually the look the same aspect of it as much as it is the grin on everyone's face.
Hmm. And there is absolutely something to be said. We've talked about it before that like showing up to the game, everyone wearing the same camouflage and wearing the same gear and guns and stuff is intimidating for sure. And it's certainly a factor, but it's not a factor forever.
Well,
Like once
it's
the
fun and it feels
game's
badass too, right? Like there's
totally,
definitely,
totally.
the cosplay airsoft, like, yeah, we feel really cool part of it for sure, the fashion softer, if you will.
But that only lasts a certain amount of time, right? Once the games start going and you start getting sweaty and you start getting tired and the other team starts getting sweaty and they start getting tired, you're really just sort of reacting to what's happening on the field. You're not really thinking about, oh my God, those guys are all wearing woodland. They're dangerous. Like, no, you're just reacting to the situation that you're in. Either you're reacting well or you're reacting poorly, but you're reacting.
prolonged exposure to most of us is also probably going to help you figure out there are a bunch of goofuses, like,
Well, there's that
you
too.
know, wait, so I feel like that probably has an impact on the long-term intimidation value of any given sort of setup. We have retained a preference for, like, Stanag Mag airsoft guns, simply because that gives us the maximum possible interchangeability to, like, toss one another mags and stuff like that, and that has proven to have a tangible benefit, I think,
Yeah,
over the
yeah,
time
totally.
we've played. And there's, because of the attitudes our team holds, there's very much room for Phil or anyone to go, all right, game face today, guys, like, we'd like to take this a little more seriously because it's a larger game, or it's a milsim game, or any other thing that we might decide to take seriously, and say, everyone, all right, like, Pat, put the Garand and the Thompson away. We're bringing the Stanag Mags. Johnny, you too. And there's no, like, malice in that. I don't think it's ever caused us really problems.
No, everyone's always game for that because people get it, right?
you know but, like, I think that for 90% of games, being as unrestrictive with your teammates in that sort of way as possible is a good play. As a gun tech, I am all about our entire team rocking M4s, because I'm all about the fact that they all come apart the same way and have more or less the same parts in them, and so it's very easy for me to work on them. That's value added for me. But I think at the end of the day, if someone, I mean, Steph, John, and Karu, I think, all have AKs at this point. So if they want to show up and rock their AKs, all right, fair enough. Have fun.
Yeah, totally.
If they're going to get me to work on them, all right, again, fair enough. Like, I can do that. Um, and yeah, I really just, I'm here for them having a blast. And the other parts of it are less important to me than that.
And to be honest, I think that if you think about people's like attitudes and how that ties into performance, someone who's having a good time and having fun is a better player. Period. Right? If you're not having fun, if your morale is crap, if you're grumpy because some, idiot made you wear the camo you didn't want to wear or use the gun you didn't want to use, well, that sucks, right? And so if you're in a position where you can actually do whatever you want, and also every now and then people go, hey, we're recording a video, wear this camo, or we're playing a big game, wear this camo, that the rest of the time you can just do whatever. So it's no skin off your back. You can do that. And that also, coming back to your original point, that makes it easy to hang out with those people because you don't harbor any ill will. Like, hey, we're wearing the same stuff today. Haha, that's so funny. Next time I'll be wearing World War II stuff. You can laugh at me in my murder hobo outfit. Cool, man. Like, just, joking around and enjoying each other's company rather than sort of building in some sort of like built in like resentment in some way. And you see the same dynamic happen with teams that choose to have like a rank structure, right?
I
So
can't
someone's
imagine working on a team that has a rank structure. And, like,
like,
not again to,
it's crazy.
not again to, like, hate on what other people enjoy, because, you do you. It's just, like, we've talked about before, Phil and I exist in, I think, a middle ground where we think Milsim is really cool, but we don't want to go completely all the way into it, and that's a little too far into it for me.
Yeah. And it's just like, the idea that's because someone's been playing Airsoft longer than you, or they've been on the team longer than you, their opinion is somehow more valuable. They're in a better position to be a leader, to run the squad or whatever. Like, it's just absolute foolishness, right? I've been on the team, the longest, let's say, and I come up with crazy, stupid ideas all the time. I do stupid stuff all the time. I was watching a video that we had shot a while ago as well. It was gameplay footage, just reviewing it or whatever. And I remember the moment that I was on the video where I'm just stood out of cover, just standing up, like looking around at what's going on. And Cal just takes me and shoves me down into the cover. He's like, "You need to get in cover right now." And I'm like, "Yeah, clearly that was not a great play by Phil, right?"
And we all
Um,
do stuff like that, right? It's just,
and so suddenly I'm the squad leader and I make the decision. Like, why? That's just that to me, that's complete foolishness. And it's again not conducive to the type of collaborative, independently thinking, and fun environment that you want to create on a team. So that's something that we've chosen to actively chosen to avoid. Same thing with like dedicated roles on the team. Oh, this person is dedicated sniper. This person is the dedicated CQB. Like, why? Just do whatever you want to do. Like, have fun with it, right? And admittedly, if that's fun for you, then that's great. But putting people in pigeonholes and forcing them to do the same stuff is not necessarily fun for me. And I mean, I haven't met anybody on our team who again, maybe because we're like minded, but nobody finds that idea fun, right?
Yeah, I mean, like we've had people over time who were more inclined to, do like the long range portion of the exercise and stuff because that's what they wanted to do, or that's what they, put the money into their gear to build towards. But practically speaking, yeah, I don't think anyone has been like, oh yeah, I'm going to be the Storm Rider or Sniper. Like, no, just play whatever you want, build whatever you want, use whatever you want, right? You know, I can think like fairly early on, like Shane, we were quite sure we wanted Shane to play with us. He's a rocking guy. He's a good player, but he's super, super funny. And we were like, yeah, man, we really want you to play. And he's like, yeah, but like I use an M14. I really don't want to get a Stanag, 5.56 rifle. And we're like, whatever. It's a NATO gun. Don't care.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
I'm quite sure that if he'd been like, oh yeah, but I'm rocking an AK, we'd have been like, whatever.
Yeah, that's right.
Because we liked him. We wanted to play more Airsoft with him. He was a good guy to have on the team. Done. Right.
Yeah.
And like, I know he did buy an M4 after because he was like, oh, like, yeah, I'll merge with the hive mind a little. And we were like, yes, but I think he mostly still ran the M14. And, I think he did a fair amount of running just like an unupgraded bolt action and inexplicably getting kills with it. And that was rad too. Whatever, it's about what you find fun. Right. So, I mean, having the matching kit is fun. Being able to participate in the game of Toss Fill a Mag is fun. But, at the same time, if you are on our team and you want to show up with, a pistol and nothing else, I'll raise an eyebrow at you because like you're going to get shot a lot, but you do you.
Yeah, really.
Right. Like I'm not going to give you trouble about it.
But it really ties in nicely to the like some of the later points that we want to hit is taking this approach and looking for people who have a similar mindset to you, but aren't identical, and you're not looking for conformity, has led us to meeting people who are actually very different from ourselves. We've touched on this in the podcast, I think, before, but like some of the people who we hang out with now when we play Airsoft with, and who we've learned a lot from, could not be more different than sort of the kinds of people who we typically hang out with or between each other, right? Like I think about guys like Chris, right? Or guys like Miles or a guy like Mark. Like these are guys who I love dearly. Like they're just really genuinely good people. And we have so little in common outside of Airsoft, or on the face of it, we have so little in common outside of Airsoft that it's just about a miracle that we were able to get to know each other. But when you do that, you get exposed to completely new worldviews, completely new ways of approaching your particular hobbies. And as a consequence of that, we have grown tremendously.
I mean, I can guarantee you full stop that, I would never have had, a 30-minute conversation with a welder if it weren't for our Airsoft team, right? Like, I don't have any like work commonality with a lot of the guys. My education is fairly different than them. I'm definitely the biggest nerd on the team in terms of like, if you will, traditional niche nerdy hobbies, D&D and the like, although Stefan gives me a run for it.
I was going to say, Stefan gives you a good run for your money.
I win or lose by dint of toy soldiers, I think, whichever way you want to interpret that. But like a lot of the guys are, a lot more into sports and fitness and stuff like that. And I've learned a tremendous amount from them. And just, I've been exposed to a bunch of worldviews that aren't the normal group of people I have hung out with for my, the majority of my life. And that's awesome, right? Like in terms of just broadening my horizons and frankly, helping me acquire some practical skills. Which is not to say that teaching isn't, a practical skill, but like I can, do useful things that I certainly couldn't do, right? Like, Mark has talked to us all enough about like changing brake pads and like rotating your tires and stuff that I can do that without a mechanic if I need to. That's just not my preference because, like, again, I'm semi-skilled labor at best, but that's a significant amount better than I'd have like YouTube.
Yeah. And I think, to carry on that point, like it's also just it's not just about the worldview. Like, yeah, sure, I didn't know anything about PLCs before Jason Fong brought them up, and I was like, "What's a PLC?" It's like programmable logic controller or whatever, and I was like, "Oh, cool, awesome, circuit board, great." Like all that stuff is fine, but it's also as a consequence of their different view, they bring different sets of experience to the table when it comes to training and working as a team, right? So if you have someone like Jason Fong, for example, who's played shinny hockey his whole life, and now he's bringing sort of like, oh yeah, well we should do some drills, or this is some way that we practice, or whatever. Okay, cool. And then Chris is coming from the weightlift background, talking about sets and reps. It's like, okay, yeah, sure. And like they're bringing their critical eye, and all of these things sort of come together in this melting pot of a team where we're not stifling any ideas. Nobody, and we've talked about this since the start, but like nobody's opinion is more important than anybody else's on the team. It's never has been. And so as a consequence, you just then start growing because you're looking at. I read a saying at work the other day, which is that the best way to have a good idea is to have lots of ideas, right? And so you have all these people who are bringing in all these ideas. And as a consequence, we end up with some nuggets here or there that if it had just been you and me and Cal, we might not have ended up there.
For
You know what
sure.
I mean?
It keeps us out of groupthink. It gives us a ton of different perspectives. And, if you're looking at, how companies want to operate increasingly, that's what you want. You want a bunch of different backgrounds. You want a bunch of people who think differently. Frankly, it's probably not bad on a social engineering, like how you want your society to run layer
Mhm.
either, right? But just you want to have as many different perspectives coming into any given thing as you can manage, right? So having, Chris who thinks differently about problem solving than Phil or I or Jason is ideal. Right?
Yeah.
Because, sometimes we look at him and go, man, I think you're like overthinking this. And he's like, oh yeah, you know, and other times he'll like look at a plan that Phil and I have laid out and we're like, yeah, this is great. And he's like, that is completely impractical.
Yeah.
Because his particular, skill set is practical planning, and our skill set is hypothetical planning in a lot of ways.
Definitely agree. And I think when you have a team, you have the opportunity to identify what those people's skill sets are. Like, what are you good at? Right. And I think the mark for me, like when you think about what a good leader is capable of doing, a good leader is capable of looking at the people who they're leading, whether that's de facto or otherwise, and understand where their skills and weaknesses are and to maximize that as much as possible. So if you know, and we've talked again, mentioned this before, but like if someone is really bad at something, don't give them that job. Well, in order for you to know that they're really bad at something, you have had to experience it and or had the conversations. And so again, like when you have a team, you have an opportunity to identify what people are good at. And so when Mark and Jason rolled together, what were they doing primarily? They were doing sneaky stuff in the woods, long range recon, long range for airsoft, let's be honest. Being really, really stealthy. Like that was their bread and butter. They were really, really good at that. And then conversely, you look at Matt and Chris, and like they were door kickers extraordinaire. They were working really, really well together. And again, that's what they were good at. And so you have an opportunity then to use the people on your team as experts to help everybody else get better. It's like, all right, Mark, Jason, I want to learn to get better at recon. What are you guys doing? What does your process look like? What do you do when you're on the field? Now I want to get good at door kicking. Matt, Chris, what are you guys doing? Right? And the same mentality is still happening today. Like I look at talking about Johnny, for example, when we're going to the field. He's playing loose. Cool. I want to learn how to play loose. He's good at playing loose. Let me pair up with Johnny and see what he's doing. What is it that makes him so loosey goosey? And how can I do the same thing? Right? That's a huge benefit of having a team that you actually meld with, and that where things work well together. If you have a team where people don't like talking to each other, then you're not going to get that.
And, that environment of comfort that, comes from long association, but also from like picking really intentionally a group of people who are chill and have fun together is, results in like Chris can walk by me while we're playing and shout, "Pat, are you effective where you are?" And I'm not going to be like, "Oh, huff, huff," like I'm staying where I am. I'm going to be like, "Oh yeah, time to move."
But you keep
Or not
bringing
if
that
I,
example up, so obviously you were a little offended.
I really wasn't though. But like, you know, um, I think I would characterize myself as someone who could be offended by that. Definitely, that's fair. But not by Chris doing it.
Yeah,
And why not? Because I know he A does that with everyone, and B would take the same feedback from all of us,
yeah.
right? But that's a really useful play environment.
And that's a
Right?
consequence of the environment that we've created on the team, right? Being able to take and receive feedback is, I would say, a life skill, but it's certainly a skill when you're considering how you want to improve. Because the only way I'm going to improve is by people looking at me going like, I liked what you did here, but it could be better if you did this, right? Or I like that you did X and I like that Y thing happened on the field, but I wonder how we could have done that better, right? Providing feedback in those types of contexts, or like the sandwich method, which is like, you did this good, that sucked, you did this good, kind of deal. Whatever you choose to do, the fact of the matter remains that you need to have an environment where you feel safe giving and receiving that feedback. And we've created that deliberately on the team by virtue of the fact of that we picked people who were chill. But if you're in an environment where people are going to get offended if you tell them, like Johnny did the other day, he's like, "Hey Phil, keep your gun up behind cover," and I was like, "Oh yeah, okay, fine, whatever." If I get offended by that, then what's the good of it, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's counterproductive, really, if you get offended by that, or if I do. But knowing, that, you can have, like, John can look at me and go, "Hey, Pat, like, what have you got done with this weird piece of your kit and why?"
Yeah,
Right? And sometimes the answer is, "Oh, I'm trying this new thing," or like, "I found a better way to do this." And other times, it's like, "I'm a dingus."
yeah,
Herp derp. And it works out well, right? That's a really useful, helpful, positive environment, which is pretty much the goal of having a team.
yeah. I'd say the one of the other benefits, or the last one I want to touch on, is the fact that if you have a team of players, now you're set up in a situation where you can do some other things that are a lot of fun that we've had the chance to do, which is like set up events that you and your team are either running, or events for your team specifically, right? And I remember having conversations with Chris many years ago now about how we had training nights, and like we wouldn't play for months, but it was a training night in like January, understanding full well that we're not going to hit the airsoft field until at least March, probably even later than that.
Yeah, March
And
if we
he
are
was,
lucky.
yeah, and he was just like, I would do this all the time. I almost rather train than play, right? And you can do that when you have a team. Like, if you can find some space, you can. We've done tons of training sessions that were like classroom sessions where we're just going through slides and looking at tactics and concepts and ideas that help broaden people's
Looking at
horizons.
GoPro footage where I run across Phil's line of fire and get smoked by someone because I did something stupid,
I mean,
which is
you
super
can.
useful.
Well, I mean, it's video is a really great teacher. Like, being able to do some review, like look at stuff that we've done in the past, like look at games that we've played, talk through exactly what happened, sort of in an after action, but after, like way after it happened. Like all of these things, and that's not to mention just more like clinic stuff where we're like, hey, let's get together and let's really work on this one particular skill, whether it's a reload or whether it's transitions or whether it's barricade work, or there's the potential that there's going to be a more like big milsim, like an actual milsim game that's going to be held later on this summer. It's potential. There's no guarantee that it's going to happen, but because they're looking for like 30 players, and I'm not sure if there's that many players interested in milsim in our area, but I would happily play it. And
Hey,
so
we can hope.
as a consequence of that, like we're going to try and set up a session or two where we work on land navigation, we work as coordination, on a grid system instead of just coordinating sort of verbally where we can just see each other because that's how it is at frontline. So all of those things
You're going to play a rousing
are
game of how not to get lost in the woods.
well, yeah, and like I think these are all things that as a team you can set up, and that's not to mention all the socializing things like dinners and stuff like that that you could have, but those are all benefits of having a group of players, I should say, that you are, engaged in playing with and engaged in spending time with, who like each other and who feel like playing together as a unit is a benefit. It's not a drawback. It doesn't feel like a chore.
Yeah, and I would add to that, like, if it feels like a chore, you need to maybe sit down and like talk about what you're doing and why.
Mhm.
Or consider if you're the one who feels like it's a chore all the time and no one else does, maybe the team you're on's the wrong team, right? That can happen,
Totally.
right? We've had
Totally.
people who played with us and were like, "You guys are awesome, but like this isn't a good fit for what I want to do," and we were like, "All right, cool, no hard feelings." We
Yeah, that was the case with Colby last year or the year before. He played several games. Knew the guy for a while, and he was a really nice guy. We seemed to get on. He was on another team. He wasn't interested in playing with them anymore. We invited him to our team. He checked it out. Had played a couple of games, hung out, and he's like, "Nah, it's not really what I want to do." Totally cool,
yeah,
right?
best guy.
And like thinking about the guys on the Discord who were one of them who's talking about like the uniform requirements. That was the first thing we told them. We're like, hey, so if they're making you wear a uniform that you don't want to wear, then maybe that team is not for you, right? And that you can't be afraid to sort of stand your ground and say like, if this is not fun for me, like why would you do that? And I think with a lot of younger players, like you can really get attached to it because you're like, oh, I'm on a team. There's a mystique that's attached to it. But if it's making you miserable, if it's making you pay money that you don't want to pay, if you're going to the field and you feel like you're being bossed around or bullied and that's not fun, do not stick with that. Like that's not a good environment, right? It's just going to make you resent playing airsoft, which is not the goal.
Yeah, you want this. I mean, we assume if you're listening to us that you want this to be sort of a thing you keep doing and keep enjoying.
Mhm.
And yeah, if it's making you miserable, if some part of it is making you miserable, find a way to fix that as quickly as you can.
Absolutely. So, guys, we hope you found this retrospective on our team entertaining and hopefully helpful. I mean, our goal is to help people find the fun in airsoft, whether that's in improving their performance, whether that's in finding like-minded players that they can sort of make friends with and amplify their play experience. And for us, being on a team has definitely been that because it's been a great fit and we've been really deliberate in making sure that it's providing the kind of environment that we want. So hopefully you can make that environment for yourself. And if you're currently on a team and you have an opportunity to shape that, really think about what it is that you find fun about being on a team.
And, talk to your teammates. I can't emphasize that enough as a theme for this episode, really.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for listening. As always, if you're interested in keeping the conversation going, you can find our Discord link in the description box below. Lots of people, lots of team members on that Discord having great conversations from all around the world. We'd love to have you join. As well, we are still looking for responses to our Airsoft injury survey. The link to that is also in the description. And if you haven't had a chance to fill it out, we would highly encourage you to do so. We've had several hundred responses so far, and the more we get, the better. Hopefully, we'll be in a position over the next few months to keep talking about some of the things that we've seen in that survey. But until then, that's all we got for you. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll talk to you next week.
Thanks, guys. Have a great week.